Voting has begun in Moscow-held regions of eastern Ukraine in referendums to become part of Russia. The results are seen as a foregone conclusion in favor of annexation, and Ukraine and its allies have made clear they won't recognize the outcomes. The Kremlin has used this tactic before. In 2014, it held a hastily called referendum in Ukraine's Crimea region that also was denounced by the West as illegal and illegitimate. Arise News' chief correspondent John Cookson has the story.
The votes are being held in the Luhansk, Kherson and partly Russian-controlled Zaporizhzhia and Donetsk regions. The vote, which asks residents if they want to be part of Russia, is certain to go Moscow's way. The sound bites which follow were conducted under the control of Donetsk separatist leadership.
Russia has forever been our motherland, if you really want to know. And without it, we simply have no one left. Ukraine has long abandoned us.
I believe everything in life will change with the referendum. Because if we are finally united with Russia, everything will be completely different.
Putin's orchestrated referendums, which have been widely denounced by Ukraine and the West as shams without any legal force, are seen as a step towards annexing the territories by Russia. Territories coming under increasing attack by Ukrainian forces. This is the front line in the Donetsk region.
He probably believes that by holding these fake and ridiculous referendums, he'll be able to sell the narrative that Russian territory is being attacked by the West. This is what he's trying to sell to the population. So it's a total reversal of the narrative that he had at the beginning of this war, which was all about, liberating Ukrainians from the evil regime in Kiev, now to saving the motherland, Russia, from evil Ukrainians in the West.
Meanwhile, the first of 300,000 Russian reservists have been gathering in various cities across Russia after President Putin ordered a partial mobilization. These men are needed to bolster the Russian military in Ukraine, a deeply unpopular move that sparked rare protests across the country and led to almost 1,200 arrests. John Cookson, Arise News.
And John Cookson joins us now from London for more. John, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday. How much of a sham elections are they?
Oh, total sham, and because we know the result's going to be already a resounding win for Putin. The people are being asked, do you want to be part of Russia? Of course, the Kremlin will make absolutely sure that all the votes, or if not all of them, but most of the votes are in favour of that. When they did it before in 2014, and you mentioned that in the intro, when Russia illegally annexed Crimea, the vote was 97% in favour of joining Russia. Now, I have to say that there are people in those regions of Luhansk, Kherson, Donetsk and Zaporizhzhia who genuinely do want to be part of Russia, especially the older generation who remember when Ukraine was part of the Soviet Union. But there are reports from that region that the Russians have illegally deported up to a million Ukrainians from the region, so they can't even vote. So it is a complete fabrication, a complete sham. Voting takes place over 5 days, so we'll know the result early next week. And of course, this is leading to a complete annexation of that region. It's 35,000 square miles that Ukraine will lose. That's about the equivalent of the size of Hungary or Portugal. So a major move at the moment by Russia to annex this part of Ukraine in this sham election, and I'm sure the result will come in favor of what the Kremlin wants out of all of this. So that's where we're at the moment. There are no international observers there to see fair play. And although in my report I put images of polling booths and ballot boxes, That's from Donetsk. Now, we don't know what's happening in the other regions. There are reports from Kherson that Russian troops are actually taking the ballot boxes to people's homes for them to vote. So it will be a brave person who would vote against the Kremlin's view if that's what's going on in the Kherson region. So a complete fabrication, complete sham, and we know what the results are already going to be.
Certainly a bold move by Russia. Now, who wants this referendum apart from Putin?
Well, certainly the breakaway leadership of Donetsk, when the invasion of Ukraine took place by Russia at the end of February this year, they called for Donetsk to join the Russian Federation right now at the end of September. But there is a thought that there could be possibly a glimmer of hope that if the vote goes the way that we think it's going to go, that the people will vote, in quotes, to join the Russian Federation. This might just give President Putin a way out. He could then go back to the Russian people and say, look, we've taken this troublesome region, we've turned it into a Russian part of the Russian Federation, and he could, in theory, say, job done. Now, that's a bit of a wild theory, but, in these troubled times, you cling to all the ways that peace could actually come back to this region, but we'll have to wait and see how it all works out.
Very well said, John. Now, as far as NATO is concerned, what risk is there?
It's a huge risk because if the vote goes the way we know it's going to go, and this territory is annexed and becomes part of Russia, as Crimea did, certainly from Russian eyes, then any attacks to reclaim this land by the Ukrainians, who are of course backed by the West, could conceivably be seen as a real act of war by Moscow. And under the protocols that Putin has on the use of nuclear weapons, if Russia, and this would include the regions that we're talking about, comes under an existential threat, then he does have the authority under those rules to use nuclear weapons. And indeed, President Biden has warned in the past that this could lead to World War III, and even saying those words is, of course, extremely troubling that we've actually come to this. But so NATO policy is not going to change. That's for sure. They will continue. NATO nations will continue to train and to give military equipment to Ukraine, but we're entering quite a dangerous phase at the moment.
Now, still speaking on Russia's options, the call-up of Russian reservists is currently underway. So what do you think is the current mood in Russia?
It's one of fear, that's for sure. When Putin made the announcement earlier this week that he was calling up 300,000 reservists aged between 18 and 65, that sent shockwaves through Russia. And as you saw in my report, men mostly are being inducted into the Russian army, a notoriously brutal regime, indeed in all the Russian military. It's not a very pleasant place to be by all reports. And young men mostly have been trying to flee the country. It's very difficult to get a flight out of Moscow to anywhere at the moment without paying thousands and thousands of dollars. And as you saw in my report, young men are being inducted into the army. Now, if they refuse, they face 12 years in jail. There have been protests in 38 cities across Russia, from St. Petersburg and Moscow in the west, right through into cities in Siberia. And there have been more than 1,000 arrests, and some of those people who have been arrested have been inducted straight into the army. So a mood of fear very much mostly amongst young men across Russia at the moment, fearing that they might soon be serving in the Russian army against Ukraine.
We certainly hope for better news by the next time we speak with you. Arise Chief Correspondent John Cookson, thank you so much for joining us on Newsday. We appreciate your time as always.